Hey everybody, it's the Moo Cow back here in Moo Cow Studios. Finally getting around to doing some videos that I've promised to do. It's the new year, so gonna have New Year's resolution to do more videos for Indie Film Cafe because we got tons and tons to do. So I reached down into my bag of tricks. There's a never-ending bag of tricks, and I pulled up a movie called Succubus Hell Bent, which is a 2007 straight-to-video movie, which is, as you can imagine from the title, based on a demon called a succubus, and that's exactly what's going on. So it's written and directed by somebody by the name of Kim Bass, and it was, I think the budget was something like about $1 million to $1.5 million. So kind of a small independent film. It's very, very 2006, 2007. So there's like large clunky camcorders and MySpace and all kinds of wonderful stuff from the mid-aughts, interestingly enough. So like I said, it was written and directed by Kim Bass. He is known for making movies like Kill Speed and Junkyard Dog and Day of Days. Those are movies that he did previously, and apparently he is working on a newer film, at least by 2018, called Jew Boy versus the Luftwaffe. So, not exactly sure what that's about, but we shall see. Apparently he was also an actor. He, of all things, he appeared as a Klingon in 1991 in Star Trek The Next Generation. He was like a member, sort of in the background, I guess. He was a member of the Klingon High Council. So, yep, this is a movie made by a Klingon. Go figure. But probably what he's most known for in his TV career, he apparently was one of the guys who wrote for In Living Color back in the day, and he is the main writer and creator of the TV show Sister Sister, which of course has the twin teenage girls. So that's what he's known for, and he made a number of movies, and Succubus Hellbent is one of them. So it's not much you can really say about that other than it is kind of a movie where jerky people sort of get what they deserve, and that's pretty much what happens. So you got these two douche nozzles, okay, Adam and his buddy Jason, and they are these, sort of rich boy, Top Gun wannabe, asshole, entitled Trump Jr. kind of people that are just douchebags, the kind that they talk like assholes, they talk like bras, and they treat women like shit, and they're just assholes. And so after they have fun playing their little Top Gun thing, they decide to go off to vacation, and they go down to Cancun, where there's lots of chickie poos running around in bikinis and such, and they're doing their usual douchebaggy kinds of things and drinking light beer and treating women like shit, because that's what you do when you're rich and white and have nothing else better to do. And then Adam bumps into this strange gothy chick who comes out of nowhere and who's played by the incredibly hot Natalie Denise Spurl. And she introduces herself as Lilith, hint, hint, hint. And so naturally she hooks up with Adam, and they have some rather kinky, violent sex. And, the next day, Adam just thinks he's going to dump her and, treat her just like every other woman. And he does, and he gets on the plane and flies back to L.A. And unfortunately for his, future, turns out Lilith is a little bit more than he expected. So, so that's basically what starts to happen is Lilith tracks him down, starts to pester him, starts to get all creepy, stalkery, and then things really start to get bad when she starts to sort of kill people. So like he's got this this girlfriend there that he also treats like shit because that's what he does, named Heather, and she comes over and stays over one night, and she decides to go for a swim, and of course Lilith is there and kills her, and he gets the blame. And then he decides he's going to go flying off again, and in his plane, because I guess his dad is like a former test pilot, and now he's like the he's like a major player in the aerospace industry, so he's got money. So he's able to have his dad's plane or his own plane, and he flies off, and Lilith shows up and gets into another plane. Incidentally, Lorenzo Lamas is one of the test pilots, interestingly enough, and flies off and pretty much grounds the guy and forces him the plane to crash. And becoming a real serious pest, keeps stalking him back in L.A. He shows up at another nightclub where he's off there doing some more douchery kinds of stuff with more chicks, and actually kills Buddy Jason, darn. And so finally he gets desperate, and Adam decides he's got to do something, and he looks on the internet, starts to look up Lilith to see, because that's what you do. You research on the internet. It's got the answer to everything. And finds this website, in MySpace, of course, and he decides that there is a demon hunter there. So he's like, well, what else do I have to lose? So he contacts the demon hunter, who turns out to be Gary Busey, of course. And Gary Busey shows up, and he's basically there to make his condo payment, and he looked cool and sort of deliver the lines in an odd, threatening way, as he usually does. But basically sets him up with like a talisman, quote unquote, and a couple of weapons and this parchment, and tells him pretty much you're on your own. This chick's immortal. Good luck. So he dumps poor Adam off. And he goes home, and he makes a pentagram and makes all these circles and starts to summon her so that he can try and kill her. And he doesn't do a very good job. She shows up and kicks the shit out of him pretty much. Although finally he ends up stabbing her because the stupid looking amulet, which just looks like a large button on a string. And so he's able to stab her, and in the end, the cops still pick him up because he's still wanted for that death plus the death of his former girlfriend, and he goes to jail. And meanwhile, Succubus, being an immortal demon, wakes up in the ambulance after the gropey EMT, who previously we saw was smooching one of the corpses, tries to do it again, and then she wakes up, and now she's got a new target, and there you go. That's the end. So, yeah, that's it. It's the unfortunate reality is that you spend a good third of the film, hanging out with these douche nozzles, and they are such assholes. And it's just that really, really, really harmed the film for me. I really didn't like anybody there. I was really hoping they were all going to die soon. They didn't die soon enough, and it's not until later that you maybe start to get a tiny little bit of sympathy for these guys, but not really. Frankly, they kind of get what they deserve, and just not fast enough, in my opinion. It wasn't badly done. The production for an independent film like this was pretty decent. Everything, looked legit. Everything was professionally done. The sound was good. The sets looked good. The acting, for the most part, is pretty good. So Adam is played by a guy named R.L. Mann, who wrote and directed and produced a number of short films, and I think he was in a couple of other films too. I think the most important, or the most noteworthy one, was in 2015. He was in an indie sort of tough New York street movie called Dutch Kills. That's actually supposed to be pretty good. I've actually not seen it, but I've heard of it. So he's the sort of the main guy. He's the main douche nozzle, and is the guy who ends up, I don't know, doesn't really win in the end, but I guess he saves his soul, so that's some tiny victory. So his equally douchey wingman, Jason, is played by a guy named Jason Blair. So he's been in a bunch of stuff. A lot of TV series he shows up, so like CSI New York, he's in there, Two Broke Girls, Heroes, Glee, The Closer. So he's been in a bunch of TV stuff. And then as far as movies go, the one that I know of is Haunting on Fraternity Row. And then I think he was in a 2008 movie with C. Thomas Howell called The Big Game. I don't think I remember seeing that, but this particular film was his debut. So there's that. Then there's Lilith, who again is played by Natalie Denise Spurl. She's been in a whole bunch of stuff. Movies include Little Black Book, The Rock Monster, and a movie in 2018 called Catharsis, which actually looks kind of cool. She was also in a bunch of TV stuff, CSI Miami, How I Met Your Mother, 2.5 Men, and some stuff like that. Apparently, she started off doing comedy improv at a number of places, which is kind of cool. And she's actually plays guitar, and I think is also the singer in a band called Kill My Coquette, of all things. So that's kind of cool. So she definitely has some experience, and you could tell she was one of the better actors there. The supporting cast is really, really kind of where the strength of the film lies. David Keith, who's been in a whole bunch of stuff, he actually plays Daddy, who's kind of sort of not really interested in helping out his son very much. He's more interested in protecting his image, so you can tell why the kid's kind of a douche nozzle, because he's kind of left on his own devices. And of course, as I mentioned, Gary Busey plays the demon hunter Sentinel, so it's always a fun thing to see Gary Busey chewing the scenery. Always wonderful. Lorenzo Lamas, as I mentioned before, who's been in a whole bunch of TV and a whole bunch of stuff. He's one of the flight instructors. The always wonderful Kelly Hu plays the main detective, who is not taking any shit from Adam and can't wait to stick his stupid ass in jail. And then there are various other cuties who show up in or out of bikinis here and there that you probably recognize from other films and other TV series. Anna O'Reilly is one, Cameron Goodman, Rebecca Bandes, and Amber Flaminio. So there's that. So like I said, this is kind of like the back in the day when MySpace was still going on. And in fact, the scene where they go off to Hollywood to blow off steam, and they're in the club, and it's kind of like I guess it's kind of like a punk club. It's not really punk though. It's more like a sort of a pop punk band, and that is actually was back in the day sort of like a semi-big MySpace band, and they were called Awaiting Patience, something like that, from Huntington Beach, California. So, clearly the filmmakers were making use of some of the local talent there. I actually looked on YouTube to see if they had any videos, but I didn't see anything there. But it's that typical kind of pop punk from the early aughts that I'm sure you've heard before. So that's kind of about it, other than I did want to mention a bit of trivia that I found out when I was researching the film. So when douche nozzle Adam is doing his little Top Gun imitation, he's flying around in Daddy's or his own plane. I'm never quite sure if it's his or his dad's. But you notice that on the plane, on the stencil on the jet, is a sort of a painting of a chick, and it says "Wild Child." And so, a couple things there. First of all, if you apparently back in the MySpace days, if you went onto MySpace and you typed in "Wild Child Adam," apparently that was the MySpace page for the film back then. And I guess he had his character there and stuff from the films. So that was kind of cool. It was kind of like a back in the day, I don't know if you remember, but Blair Witch kind of started off that way when they first came out back in 1999, and they were utilizing MySpace and stuff to help promote their film. So this is another early example of that. But then the other thing is that particular jet that they filmed in the movie is an L-39. It actually crashed for real, tragically, and 2 people died because of it. They were flying over and filming in an area called California City. So all of that sort of Badlands-ish kind of area that they were shooting at is a real location. And unfortunately, something happened and the plane went down. And I don't know exactly how much of that footage is actually used in the film, which is kind of creepy and gruesome, really, when you think about it. I mean, I don't know, but apparently there was a real crash and 2 people really died from that. So, kind of tragic. You know, what are you going to say? I mean, these things do happen, but generally not for a small film like that. And I can only imagine, you know, what Kim Bass and others may have had to go through after that. I mean, it's really got to put a damper on you. And I'm assuming they sort of want to like not really talk about it and leave all that kind of mess behind. But as far as the film itself goes, you know, it's okay. Like I said, its weakness lies in the fact that you have to put up with these just irredeemably douche nozzles who are just complete jerks, and they're carrying the film. And even though they sort of end up getting what they deserve, it kind of comes a little too late for me to feel satisfied. And as a horror film, there really isn't a whole lot of horror going on. You understand that Lilith is kind of a, you know, this sort of immortal creature that can do all sorts of unnatural things. So when she's stalking him, you sort of expect it after a while. It's just not, there's not a lot of tension, I guess is really what I'm saying, and not really a lot of horror, other than you're just kind of waiting for the payoff for this guy to finally get it, and he kind of really doesn't. You know, he manages to weasel out of it just like most rich kids do who, you know, are protected. Unfortunately, that's just the way life is. That's the real horror story. But, I mean, I guess he ends up going to jail, in theory. But, you know, the horror aspect and the tension aspect weren't really kind of there. But like I said, at least the production, that element was well done. The acting was pretty much spot on for the most part. I can't say anything bad about anybody there. I mean, even good old Gary Busey in his little limited amount of time, you know, he did his bit, and I was convinced. I'm always convinced by Gary Busey. You know, he always plays kind of a slightly unhinged character, and I believe it because he just, you know, I get it. He's just kind of like that, and that's cool. That's why you hire Gary Busey. So, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of violence either. It's kind of, you know, sort of PG rated. It's a little sleazier than I expected. You know, you kind of expect there to be a little bit more nudity in this sort of thing and maybe a little less sleaze, but it's kind of the opposite. There was very, very, very brief nudity. It was like you could kind of sort of see some side boob from Heather and a little bit from Lilith, but there's nothing front and center about it, which is all right, but it's just the sleaziness aspect, these jerks that you have to sort of suffer through in order to sort of get the story going, and just their horrible treatment of women and these sort of vacuous women that they present. I mean, they are all just like empty-headed idiots, with the exception of Kelly Hughes' detective character, who is just kind of like, you know, sort of the dragon lady. She's sort of bound and determined to you know, put this guy in jail, and that's about it. So she doesn't really get a chance to really expand her character or do much with it, but at least she's not vacuous and worthless like some of these other, you know, chick characters are. Very two-dimensional characters. They're all kind of very flat, and it kind of leads to being sort of a meh kind of a film. So out of a 1 to 5, I would say I would give it a 2.5. There is a little bit of satisfaction, like I say, finally seeing this jerk get what's coming to him, although the payoff is, you know, not nearly what you would hope for. There's a little bit of violence as far as the way Lilith takes care of some of the people there, although, you know, like she kills a couple of cops and she kills his girlfriend Heather, who didn't really do anything. So I'm kind of like, you know, I understand her going after him, but what did those folks do anything? What did they do to her? They didn't really do anything. I mean, I guess she's a demon, so doing evil things is what she does, but, you know, it feels better and more satisfying when it's being done to him because, again, capital D douche nozzle needs to get what he deserves. That's the satisfaction that we, the audience, need to have. We don't really get it, unfortunately. So that kind of lames out. The horror aspect kind of lames out, and the you know, the tension just, it really isn't there. So that's kind of why I say it's kind of a mediocre film, kind of meh, not poorly done, not poorly executed, doesn't look like crap. It's just kind of disappointing overall. So there you go. So that's the latest video from the Moo Cow. Like I said, I've got a giant stack of movies I got to pull out and review. So I figured, you got to start somewhere. And so randomly, I just yanked this one up. And I figured I'm here at Moo Cow Studios. I might as well do a video and see what we can do. So